I'm thinking of giving you our family home, you who were loved by no one, poor thing." Suddenly, I received a message from my sister Stacy, who had been out of touch for a while. When our parents died in an accident 3 years ago, Stacy did not fulfill her duties as the chief mourner and only showed up during the inheritance proceedings to decide on her own to inherit the family home, leaving me with nothing. However, I did not complain because I did not want to fight with her. With our parents gone, I thought I would not have to contact her anymore. I was relieved to finally be able to cut ties with her, but now, out of the blue, she says she's giving me the house. I don't need this house anymore because I'm getting married soon. I'm telling you I'm giving it to you because you're struggling to find a place to live. Be thankful to your kind sister." I listened to her usual remarks in silence for a while, thinking she probably wanted to get rid of the old family home by dumping it on me. But it seems she misunderstood something. However, I have no obligation to point that out to her. I simply said, "I understand, I'll come visit," and hung up the phone. Later, when I met Stacy for the first time in 3 years, she realized she had made a big mistake and that this decision would lead her to rock bottom. My name is Megan Hansen. I work for a major corporation and I live alone. Since starting to live alone during college, I have become estranged from my family home. One day, after many years, I received a call from my sister Stacy, who lives in our family home. I have always been uncomfortable with Stacy since childhood, and her presence was the reason I left home early. Stacy, who was glamorous and beautiful from childhood, was adored and spoiled by our parents. In contrast, I was always compared to Stacy and was often being told, "Compared to Stacy, Megan is very vanilla." At home, Stacy's whims were always indulged, and I had to beg even for necessary items for school. I wore all of Stacy's hand-me-down clothes, and I never received new toys or even school supplies. I wore worn-out clothes, played with toys that Stacy had tired of and discarded, and my old pencil case always contained short pencils. Stacy constantly looked down on me, comparing our appearances to belittle me. Stacy's friends often ridiculed me as well. As for our parents, they never reprimanded Stacy for her attitude and seemed to have no interest in me. They always attended school events for Stacy but were often out and unavailable during my parent-teacher meetings, leading to situations where I, as a child, had to apologize to teachers who had taken the trouble to visit. Stacy was allowed to pursue any hobby she wanted, such as piano and ballet, with our parents willing to spend money on her. In contrast, when I asked to take lessons, I was shut down with a single comment about the cost. I was not allowed to do anything. In such an environment, the only thing I could do was study. It was the only way I could think of to leave this house and become independent, to protect myself. Of course, I wasn't allowed to attend tutoring, so I studied on my own. I couldn't even get new textbooks, so I studied using old ones passed down from friends' older siblings. Even though I was only studying in my room, our parents found me off-putting, saying, "Even if you're smart, you lack charm," and Stacy mocked me, saying, "You're ugly, so studying is all you have." Thus, I became increasingly isolated within my family. While my parents and Stacy would go shopping or out to eat together, I was rarely included. When I returned home, there would just be $5 left for me, and I often ate frozen pizza. Sometimes, I would come home from school to find that my family of 3 had gone on a trip without me. Being left behind became a routine part of my life, and I eventually got used to it. Even when I achieved top grades in school, my parents showed no interest, and they were indifferent when I entered a prestigious university on a scholarship. The only thing they appreciated was that the scholarship meant they didn't have to pay much for my education. By that time, I had no expectations of my parents paying for my education. So I plan to work part-time as much as possible to support myself. Having been admitted to a prestigious university, I found a well-paying job as a tutor, which allowed me to move out of my house as soon as I started college. Living a life centered around part-time jobs was important to me, because being independent from my parents was a crucial challenge in my life. I couldn't afford to fail a year or be unable to find a job. Therefore, I never neglected my studies and actively participated in volunteer activities that would be advantageous for job hunting. Despite this, I was fortunate to make good friends in college and managed to enjoy my campus life to a certain extent, choosing an affordable one-room apartment for students and living on my earnings without relying on my parents. I graduated from university and successfully secured a job at a major company. I find my job fulfilling and living satisfying days. Being freed from my family, living alone feels incredibly comfortable. It's ironic when I think about it. Being compared to and looked down upon by my sister Stacy motivated me to work hard academically. And it's because of this effort that I am enjoying my current life. Even after I started living on my own, my parents, who were never interested in me, never contacted me, and the rare times I reached out, their responses were cold. Gradually, we grew apart, and years passed. Of course, I had never received any contact from my sister Stacy. So when she called me that day, I picked up the phone feeling perplexed. "Hey, Mom and Dad died from an accident. So come home and organize for the funeral, you're the chief mourner." When I answered the phone, Stacy started talking rapidly in an angry tone. "Chief mourner?" I couldn't understand the situation immediately and was unable to respond right away. "Hold on, calm down. Is it true that Dad and Mom have died?" "That's what I'm saying. They were in a terrible car accident. You've been living comfortably by yourself, unaware of anything. You've been so unfilial all this time, at least do your duty as the chief mourner properly." Stacy was furious, leaving no room for discussion. I managed to say, "Anyway, I'll hurry back," and hung up the phone. Despite my estrangement, I was shocked to hear about my parents' death. They may not have shown me affection as parents, but they did raise me, even if it was just out of obligation. On my way home, I reflected on my past and could hardly believe that my parents were truly gone. Upon arriving at my family home, I was greeted not by my sister but by my uncle. It seemed Stacy was out. "Megan, it's been a while. You're all grown up." My uncle, my father's brother, who lived nearby, was the only adult who always treated me equally, without any discrimination between Stacy and me, even when we were children. He was concerned about Stacy and my parents and occasionally checked in on them. He informed me about Stacy's current situation. Over the past few years, Stacy had married and divorced multiple times, with all the divorces being her fault due to infidelity or debt, leading to alimony payments that my parents had to cover because she couldn't pay. When she wasn't married or in a relationship, she lived at the family home, supported by our parents. My uncle had tried many times to make her independent, even finding her job opportunities. But my parents always gave in to her, refusing to listen. Then, this accident happened. "I'll cover all the funeral expenses, so I want you to serve as the chief mourner." Stacy is still the same, and it's impossible for her to manage the funeral. She can't be trusted. I feel at ease with you, Megan, because you're responsible. I couldn't refuse my uncle's request. He not only admonished my parents not to discriminate between their daughters, but also bought me new stationery when I couldn't afford it, and gave me hand-me-down textbooks from my cousin, his child. I had received so much help from him. Therefore, I couldn't say no to my uncle's request and agreed to take on the role. Stacy didn't help with any of the preparations and only showed up on the day of the funeral. Despite having been taken care of by my parents, she showed no sign of mourning. Stepping out to take phone calls during the chanting, yawning, and chatting with relatives we hadn't seen in a while. I managed to complete the funeral without any issues, and handled all the paperwork and greetings to relatives by myself. Stacy only showed up first when it was time to discuss the inheritance. However, due to covering for Stacy's alimony payments, there wasn't much of an inheritance left from my parents, only the old house. I had no fond memories of this house and no desire to live there. But Stacy started claiming, "This is my house." Negotiating with my sister Stacy, who was upset, seemed too troublesome and exhausting. So I decided to let her have the house as inheritance and settled the inheritance proceedings peacefully, returning to my usual life. However, even though she had a place to live, Stacy quickly found herself struggling financially without anyone to support her. Having never worked a proper job before, she was at a loss about how to start job hunting. Thus, she pleaded with our uncle, who runs his own company, to give her a job. The generous uncle accepted her, and she is now working there as an assistant. Years passed, and I was living a fulfilling life both personally and professionally when, 3 years later, I received my first contact from Stacy since our parents' funeral. When I answered the phone, she abruptly said, "I'm going to give you the old family home. Why are you bringing this up all of a sudden?" As I listened, it became clear that the family home had significantly deteriorated over the years, with the exterior paint peeling and various parts of the house falling into disrepair. Moreover, Stacy's neglectful lifestyle had led to mold on the tatami mats and wallpaper, creating a dire situation. She had no money for renovations, so the house was left as is. "I'm about to marry a wealthy man, so I won't need to live in this house anymore. I thought I'd give it to you, at least as a memory of our parents, since they never loved you." While she laughed as she spoke, it was likely she found the paperwork to sell the house too bothersome and was trying to offload it onto me. I told her I would think about it and contacted our uncle immediately. After telling my uncle about Stacy's proposition, he said, "If the house is a hassle for you, I can take it off your hands. But if you want it, Megan, you're welcome to have it." Stacy had found a man to mooch off and had quickly quit working at our uncle's company. My uncle and Stacy no longer had any contact. After hearing this, I called Stacy back. "I've decided to take the house. My husband works in real estate, so we'll go through the procedures together soon." "What? You're married? Since when?" Her voice mixed with surprise. She had shown no interest in my marriage, so her reaction was unexpected. 2 years ago. You, Dad, and Mom never cared about my life, right? That's why I didn't bother telling you about my partner. Your husband must be in real estate sales? Sounds like a tough job with not much salary. She looked down on my husband, whom she had never met, and said whatever she wanted before hanging up. My sister hadn't changed at all over the years, leaving me with nothing but a sigh. On the promised day, my husband and I visited the family home. "You're late." "I'm busy too, so hurry up." "You've always been slow." The family home was in worse shape than I expected. Entering the house, my eyes were immediately drawn to the peeling wallpaper. Cotton-like dust accumulated in the corners of the hallway. There were stains on the floor, and some floorboards were starting to come up. Spider webs stretched across the window frames, and the curtains looked dull with dust from not being washed for a while. The condition was worse than I anticipated. I was stunned as I looked around the dilapidated family home. Even though I had no fond memories of the house, seeing it in such disrepair was surprisingly sad. My parents may not have shown me love, but they at least doted on Stacy. I wondered if they ever imagined she would treat their legacy this way after their deaths. Standing frozen in front of me, Stacy also seemed to freeze, her gaze fixed on something behind me. It was my husband, Jeff, who had caught her eye. Jeff, always meticulous about his appearance, wore well-tailored suits and luxury watches. Stacy's gaze, initially assessing Jeff from head to toe, then shifted to the luxury car we arrived in, seemingly appraising its value. Even Stacy had to recognize that Jeff was not just an ordinary company employee. Given his attire, the car, and his demeanor. "Nice to meet you, Stacy. I'm Jeff, Megan's husband. I regret not being able to greet you when we got married. My apologies for the late introduction." As Jeff extended his business card to Stacy, her eyes widened noticeably upon seeing his title. Her attitude shifted dramatically, and she began to flirt with Jeff. A stark contrast to her previous demeanor. Stacy is like a lioness on the hunt. Jeff, you are such a kind man for marrying a sister as hopeless as her. Well, we're relatives now, so let's get along, shall we? Using her usual, flirtatious tone reserved for ensnaring men, my sister approached my husband. However, Jeff deflected her advances with a professional sales smile. His arm, subtly attempted to be embraced, was swiftly shaken off. And he gave no openings to Stacy. Maintaining his sales smile, he methodically proceeded with the procedures for transferring the family home. Stacy, not getting the attention she sought from my husband, grew irritable and whispered to me, loud enough for my husband to hear. "What's with your husband? Well, he must be quite the oddball to marry someone like you. You're being rude." I snapped back, irritated, but Jeff calmly smiled, pretending not to hear Stacy's words while finishing up the paperwork. As we were leaving, having completed all the procedures, I finally said what I had wanted to tell my sister. "I got married to Jeff thanks to you. He was a senior during my college days. But it all started when you dumped the funeral arrangements on me 3 years ago. I heard he was in real estate, so I contacted him for advice about inheriting the house. So, I'm actually grateful to you." Stacy bit her lip in frustration, but I continued without care. "Jeff thought I was beautiful since our college days. To think there was a man who thought that way. Thank you for letting me meet him. I hope you're happy with your new husband too." Saying this with a smile, Stacy trembled with anger. For a sister who always belittled and looked down on me, the existence of a man who had no interest in her and chose me over her was unbearable to her pride. Knowing all the mistreatment I had suffered from Stacy, Jeff looked at me with a smile and took my hand. Led by my husband, we left the house without looking back at Stacy, who shouted from the doorstep, "I have a wealthy husband too." Ignoring her, we got into the car and left the family home behind. About a year after transferring to the family home, I received another call from Stacy. Answering the phone, she yelled furiously, "You tricked me. Give back the land of the family home." She must have heard from someone that the land's value had significantly increased when we took over the family home. My husband's real estate company had early information about a large shopping mall opening nearby, which would greatly improve transportation access and, consequently, increase land values. The land is currently under negotiation by my husband's company. "You have a wealthy husband, right? You might still make it if you act now. Why don't you buy it back?" After hearing this, Stacy began to sob and share her plight. I was deceived by that man. I'm struggling even for my daily life now. You're the only family I have left, Megan. You're the only family in this world for me, right? Help me. Listening to Stacy's tearful plea in silence, I learned that her husband, whom she believed owned a restaurant, was actually managing a scam bar involved with shady organizations. Moreover, it seems that the bar Stacy's husband was managing was involved with shady organizations. When the bar was raided, her husband was arrested in a manner akin to cutting off a lizard's tail to escape. Stacy had been asked by her husband to lure customers to the bar using an app. She was instructed to leave the table when it was time for the bill, implying she wasn't fully aware of the bar's operations. However, she was still heavily interrogated for her involvement, suspected of being complicit in their activities. I'm totally broken, both physically and mentally. You're the only one I can rely on. We're sisters, so you'll help me, right? She appealed desperately, attempting to appear pitiable. You never helped me, did you? Far from helping, you blamed me for everything, resulting in me being punished and not allowed to go on a school trip. Remember when Mom made me lunch for a field trip? And you threw it in the trash, getting me scolded? I wasn't allowed to eat dinner for 3 days. Clothes, stationery, bags, all were your hand-me-downs, which you deliberately damaged before giving to me. You took the new textbooks Uncle bought for me and threw them into a puddle. You even feigned illness to ensure Mom wouldn't attend my parent-teacher conference. Want to hear more? I don't remember any of that. It's all in the past. How long will you hold on to childhood grievances? It's so resentful. Are you really going to abandon your own sister? Realizing nothing would get through to her, I simply ended with, maybe you should learn to make an effort, and hung up the phone. Afterwards, Stacy tried to seek help from our uncle again but was refused. Even during her time working at his company, despite being assigned only menial tasks, she made numerous mistakes, causing more work for the employees rather than helping. After being turned away by our uncle, my sister Stacy, relying on the business card my husband Jeff had given her, attempted to get a job at his company. At the reception, she caused a scene, loudly declaring, "I am the sister of the CEO's wife, get me through to the CEO," which led to her being surrounded by security guards. Despite having the business card, an inquiry was made to the CEO's office from the reception. Jeff informed them she was a stranger, and Stacy was told to leave by the security guards. However, she attempted to force her way through to the elevator and was detained. Let go of me. I'm telling you, I'm the CEO's sister-in-law. She struggled fiercely, grabbing a pen from the reception and swinging it around, injuring a security guard. The police were called, and she was taken into custody without any chance to escape this time. With no one to vouch for her and obviously no one to pay her bail, Stacy ended up spending a short time behind bars. Later, I heard from local friends that Stacy is frequently seen with the entourage of her husband's acquaintances. It seems she is being conveniently used by them. And now there are rumors she might be involved in actual crimes. Stacy, who never worked properly and always sought easy money from our parents or the men she was with, has not learned her lesson even after such an ordeal. As a result, she has reached a point of no return. If only she had chosen to work hard back then, things might have been different now. Today marks the 7th anniversary of our parents' passing. Stacy did not show up. Returning to my hometown after a long time, I only heard bad news about my sister. My uncle is utterly dismayed but assures me, "This is Stacy's own doing, Megan, you shouldn't feel responsible." Contemplating after meeting my uncle, Jeff asked me, "Are you concerned about your sister?" It would be a lie to say I'm not concerned. But thanks to her, I met you. I'll take what happened with our parents and sister as lessons for the future. Jeff cherishes me profoundly, providing the familial love I missed out on as a child in abundance. Now, we're living happy days together, valuing our time and enjoying activities like shopping and dining out during our free moments. When we manage to get a substantial break, we go on overseas trips, relishing our time together as we did before marriage. Recently, we've been discussing starting a new family. I'd like to have 2 kids.
Yeah,
That would be nice. If we were to have 2 children and they were sisters. I thought firmly about giving them all the love I could, using my parents as a lesson on what not to do.